Call to order it is Tuesday, October 15th, 2019, rescheduled from October 10th. It's 4:30, 6 o'clock, and this is a work study agenda. Do we have the roll call, please?
President Norris,
Here.
Vice President Herron,
Here.
Secretary Spikers,
Here.
Commissioner Pollard,
Here.
Commissioner Carter.
Here.
Thank you.
Next, topics of discussion. And I guess, do I turn it over to you?
I'll be glad to pick it up from you.
Okay, due diligence summaries, Dustin? All right. And
So
updates.
our usual agenda here. So due diligence summary updates, as you know from our last work study, we've concluded ours. Overlake continues to do a bit of due diligence. They still every now and then will send us questions, mostly clarification at this point in time. It's been quite a while since they've asked for anything new. So it looks like everything on their side is winding down as well. So tonight, what we have to really land on is the definitive agreement conversation. So I hope it doesn't feel like a fire hose at the end of tonight, but we have quite a bit to talk about. So I'll just jump in, unless anybody has any questions about on the due diligence perspective.
I have a question about just clarification. When we got into this thing, we were talking and we went out to bid on a contract, a lease type contract. I heard or read from the hospital materials that now we're talking about a operational agreement. And it seems to me we've changed the rules in midstream. And those organizations that might have been interested in a administrative agreement were turned off by the contract. But now we're into an administrative agreement, and they don't have an opportunity to bid or to contact us or whatever.
So the RFP, when it went out, was not specific about what the arrangement could look like. It was pretty open-ended to be able to give people an opportunity to respond back. And so so that was the original RFP. When the Astria deal was discontinued, now this has become a direct to overlay conversation. So it's really not a directly associated with
for example, Virginia Mason and Washington were turned off by the contract concept.
No, we actually had talked with UW about a management services agreement. We definitely talked to Virginia Mason about a management services agreement. That was all they were willing to consider. So yes, everybody's had an opportunity who was interested to express what their level of interest would be.
But I think what Commissioner Pollard is saying now, it's looking at like more of a management administrative agreement, is that what you're saying? As opposed to lease agreement?
That's my understanding, is that correct?
Yeah, that's actually the conversation. That was what I
Yeah.
introduced to you at the last time we met, was that it was appearing that we needed to start considering to shift that direction. And then, yes, that is what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I just feel that Virginia Mason and UW, despite what you say about you contacted them and so on, and perhaps others would have been interested in working with us on an administrative agreement, but
If that was the case,
the pool was poisoned by this concept of a lease contract, and also it was a very poor operation. I don't know. I just think that we've changed the rules in midstream, and I think that my personal opinion is that if we go with Overlake, it's going to be a loser. So I might as well be frank about that.
So as we go through the conversation today, whether we're changing stream or not is a board level decision.
Yeah.
So that's part of what the information to be shared today.
because my recollection, when we had just the top three left, the two of them were more likely to do the management, operational, and that did not work, I guess, did not go well because of that particular type of level So I know University of Washington and the other reason that University of Washington was not, that we didn't look at more seriously is because they had another management
right.
that was on
Right.
top of that. It was more regional.
Yeah,
If I'm
they
trying
had-
to recollect all these things,
You are
yeah.
absolutely
Yeah,
right.
so-
University of Washington, so when we had conversations with the University of Washington,
Yeah.
all that they were comfortable with was management services, and it was only by way of this third party.
Right.
That is a for-profit entity, out of, from
From
Farther
another,
East.
right.
Yeah, from Farther East, I don't remember the exact location that they were from. And so that was the group concluded that was not desirable, that did not feel like, and it was not, the University of Washington really was not interested, and they were very clear to say, we just can't do it from where they were at that moment. And Virginia Mason also said all that they could offer was,
Yeah, that,
right, something similar to what they set up with Yakima, but even uncomfortable going even that deep, and that one is a pretty superficial agreement as well.
Yeah, I think we asked for proposals, any kind of proposals.
That's true.
And so they came back with whatever they could.
That's right.
So we didn't
Yeah.
change, I think, the plan midstream and all. I think what Commissioner Pollard is wondering though is Virginia Mason did offer a management type of management operations administrative agreement, which is similar, I think is what he's still
Of what,
saying,
yeah.
to what we are now looking at now.
With overlay.
And so that's why he's saying that, I think, if I'm wrong, that why aren't we looking at Virginia Mason at this time? Because now we're stuck in a management operations type
Yeah.
of scheme. And I do know though that Overlake was the only one that was willing to look at,
More seriously, to take some
well,
time.
buying a hospital after 6
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
So.
it's true.
I don't know if that's something that we have to go and talk about some more. or what.
probably need to look that farther.
So,
Well, so we have, let's talk through this some more, but come back to, because we are under LOI and there's a term for.
Exclusivity.
Thank you,
Yeah, we
exclusivity
cannot-
clause,
yeah,
so we
we
can't
can't discuss it
entertain
with
from
others.
others.
right now.
Yeah, unless we.
I
have
thought
some-
we were in a non-exclusive LOI.
No, it's
No.
exclusive under the LOI terms. All LOIs would be exclusive. I don't know any that would.
Oh, no, we talked about non-exclusive at the very beginning about how we were going
Only
to
for
do
the
this.
period of the LOI. After that, it's not exclusive, but during the period of the LOI, it is until you give notice.
Okay, I don't want to take any more time. I got some feedback from some medical people, including one of my cardiologists, and she said, if I had to go to a hospital in Puget Sound, the last one I'd go to is Overlake. There are a lot of reasons why Overlake is not a desirable partner, but I won't take any more time.
Thank you. Ready, Dr. Okay.
Just get the reminder, this is completely familiar to you all, about the 4 reasons why we said to affiliate. I thought it was, if we're starting to talk about a different approach, that it's worthy of putting it up again, just as a check to make sure that we always stay within these guidelines. And then just again, that reminder of what is kind of the issue that has caused us to pause. And it has to do with that abandonment of the $1.5 to $1.9 million of interest expense. So at our last meeting, when we talked about that $1.5 to $1.9 million that was abandoned, we started challenging, is there possibly a path down which we could bring together the interest expense and the cost report together? And so a path can exist. So we have learned that a path can exist. And that's if, and I kind of highlighted the if you can demonstrate this concept, which is called common interest or common control. And so that could be applicable to both the lease operating agreement model. So we've talked about the NUCO model, which is where NUCO is a subsidiary of Overlake, and then the new concept that David brought forth at our last meeting, which was a subcore, which was just a name we came up with to differentiate it from NUCO. And that would be that it's a subsidiary of this entity. And so both of those could do a lease operating model. So that's the model we've been talking about all along. And you could bring the interest expense and the cost report together into the same entity if you were able to demonstrate this common interest, common control concept. So it is possible, but it is a really high risk to do. And the problems are that nowhere in the federal guidelines does it tidily, have a tidy description of what common interest, common control is. And so it is interpreted, or it is approved, or recognized by your fiscal intermediary. So for us, that would be Meridian. So they're the ones who say, yes, what you're demonstrating here is either common interest or common control. We did connect with Ide Bailey, so Steve has some great relationships that he's nurtured over the years, and so Ide Bailey was willing to step in, and if you recall, Ide Bailey is one of the 3 top cost report preparers in the country. So we use Whiffley. DZA has been utilized by Overlake as their source of consultation in this process. So Ide Bailey was a nice neutral party to go to ask these questions. Not to mention Ide Bailey is known for being the one you turn to if you have kind of a deeper, more sophisticated, more complicated question or a more complicated cost report. So got them on the phone and had a couple of meetings with them and asked them about this, about what could there be a path. And they're the ones who said, yes, there can be a path, and here's how you do it. And then we said, do you have an example? So they were able to pull up one example. So they said, while they knew it was possible, they only knew of it actually happening one time. And so the one time, they shared with us as much as they could, as far as they sent us some documents that had been a lot of redacting of names and such, and it was pretty superficial information that they were able to share. And so that arrangement there was allowed as a common interest, common control. It's a kind of an after the fact that you get the approval. And what happened to them was they were midway through their agreement and did one minor modification of their agreement, and Meridian said, oh, no more. Doesn't meet, and they just said, no more does it meet common interest, common control, and it was one fairly small edit as it was described to us. So Ide Bailey is the one who positioned this in a high-risk category of being able to get through this process.
So just a tad change becomes a high risk, huh?
That was the experience of the one organization who did something, and it appeared to be somewhat similar to what we are talking about. Again, they didn't give us a depth of information. They really couldn't. It was protected information, but they were able to give us some summaries.
High risk of what?
High risk of not being recognized any longer as a common interest, common control. And so when you have the common interest, common control, that interest expense, the 1.5 to 1.9, can be claimed on the cost report, and so you get it back. But if you don't have that common interest, common control, then you can't. It's not an allowable expense.
Now, the common interest, common control, maybe common interest, I don't see a common control at all on this.
Yeah, why would they?
It is an or.
simultaneously?
It doesn't have to be an and, it is an or. But the common interest was actually the route that this other entity undertook. And that's the one that felt compromised as soon as they changed an aspect of it.
So sounds like common control is, and to have a little push there, because, just because that change becomes, you know, and seems like the other party is controlling.
Yeah, that's why the common control is hard.
That's hard,
It's a-
why,
it's a-
yeah.
It's a,
I mean, it just,
Unless it's
just
defined
a
real
little-
carefully.
Yeah.
that's the challenge,
Well,
is
it's
it doesn't
lost in the
have great
translation.
definition.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
definition.
They would have to,
Yeah.
well, the only way that would work
It's
is,
not
I
gonna-
think, is if Overlake would adopt our community census or community
Needs assessment or?
needs assessment and adopt that to undertake their priorities and
Help to define what their priorities are. Yeah.
I think it takes more than that.
But I think that would probably, I mean, that would be
It's all fair game.
obviously more, but I think they'd have to do something like that.
Sure, and I don't think that would be hard, I don't think that would mount much of a challenge at all to the process. Because they consider this community to be a part of their community as well. So they kind of already recognize that our community needs are represented in theirs.
Well, they'd have to bring in or support alcohol and drug addiction, mental health.
Behavioral,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing that they would have to really focus on, because that's probably what's.
And our
Yeah,
value especially.
And as we talked to Bailey, it really has much more to do with business interest, business control, not the
Healthcare.
healthcare responsibilities or the healthcare needs. But it's really about business interests and business control.
How much money they make or don't make.
Well, and who's in control
Of the
of
money.
the assets, who's in
Yeah.
control
Yeah.
of the liabilities, yeah.
They didn't disclose who was involved.
They couldn't. And they even kind of went to explore if they could, so that they could put us in touch, but they came back and said they just were not comfortable.
I just don't want to see us put in a secondary position all the time. I mean, you know, it's just my comment. I want it to be a, you know, a fair game for all,
Right, okay, right,
not secondary for SBH.
right, yeah, and so the control would mean somebody would have, one of the two would have to be in control of everything.
So if we did an operations management type agreement with Overlake, is there any secondary agreement that we could have with them for the sale of the hospital down the line?
Should they want it?
Okay. That'd have to be separate though? I don't know.
No, so I'll jump ahead because everything is still kind of just in pencil form. So our conversation around that was that to insert language that says at the time of the renewal, that we would hold the right of first refusal, so that we could offer it up. If they chose not to buy it, they would have right of first refusal, but we would be willing to sell it at that point in time.
Okay.
Have we considered exploring with them the purchase of the hospital right now, rather than waiting to the
6
change
years.
of contract?
They are not interested in that.
You want to see if it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I-
everything.
You can't blame them from a business
I'd try
perspective.
it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't blame them, but there
It's a lot.
may be buyers out there.
A lot of people leave
Yeah.
vehicles
Might be
for
willing
one just
to
to see
take
how
the
they're.
hospital out.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
Sure, they're all
People that don't
falling
even
right
need
and
to
left.
lease them.
Yeah.
you know,
No, it does not
credit.
have to be a health system, it could be a big corporate.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Pollard, the time that you will see buyers come out of the woodwork is when it has been demonstrated that you can move beyond dependency and critical access status.
Yeah.
So
I would
that's,
think so.
so over the next 7 years, that is Overlake's high priority, is to move us beyond dependency. It doesn't mean the plan to abandon it, but moving beyond dependency on it. And I think as soon as that is demonstrated, now there's a likelihood that you will have other buyers who will come and say, oh, well, look at that. Now we're gonna compete for it
Well,
because it's
Yeah, I
that
think,
value.
yeah.
Madam President,
Yes.
respond to that. in the proposed agreement, Overlake feels so strongly about the critical access status that if we were to lose it, it would invalidate the contract.
Mhm.
So as I say, it doesn't mean that it doesn't continue to be highly valuable to keep it. It's just moving beyond that concept of being dependent on it, which is what
Yeah.
this group has said. And that's why it's the lead of our strategic plan is to move away from dependency on critical access status.
Which
you
means
talking
dependency on one payer unit, essentially, how they pay.
Yeah, you're talking only financial, is that correct? You're talking
Yes.
financial.
Yeah. It does not mean that anybody has a desire or an intention to walk away from it, only just to be left with a choice of whether you want to keep it.
And how it helps the bottom line, or doesn't.
The one thing that concerns me, that I'm hoping it will not look like we are going to be a transfer facility if and when that happens, because, we need to grow. And right now, we could be just treating and transferring patients to another facility. So this is what concerns me in the future. You know what I mean?
So I
Yeah.
think that actually is why this solution that's being kind of worked on right now actually works against that concern, that prevents it, because, and we'll get to it, you guys are asking great questions,
Okay.
jumping me around. But if there is treat and transfer, which means that you aren't retaining business here, and so that would be operations generating or
Yeah,
financial
yeah.
generating, the outcome is that Overlake will share in those losses.
Okay.
So
That's just a
it will be to
concern
their,
for me.
it will be to their benefit
To
to
do-
keep as much here as possible because they want to generate revenue here.
Gross
Because otherwise
yeah,
it costs them money to not generate revenue here. Because this is a model that is dependent on them
Mhm.
producing.
Well, the other thing is, just like we keep track of our primary care referrals to the hospital, they will probably keep track of all
They should.
all transitions from here, start point,
They should.
to the hospital. So they'll look at that.
Mhm.
And if they increase the amount of patients from this area by 2 or 3-fold by having,
This here,
emergency
yes.
care here,
Yeah.
would they still think that'd be something that they will
Because I think
look at?
having
I think
that
that's
information,
what they
watching
want.
that really closely, will help them really see the value of moving forward with the purchase,
Yeah.
so that because otherwise that represents losses beyond just what would be lost here, but losing those referrals.
Because we do transfer patients all over
Sure do.
Yeah.
the area. Swedish, I don't know if we do many
We don't
everywhere,
really
but
know this
Not
stuff.
many,
So-
just if there's.
definitely Overlake and sometimes
Valley General.
Jason and
Mostly,
Harbor.
mostly Harbor, Overlake, Swedish, Issaquah or Swedish First Hill, and Harborview Children's would be probably the top
Yeah,
5 that
children's,
we would
yeah.
look to. Outside of that, it would be because the patient had a very particular relationship in another hospital that they were best served by that transfer, or our usual referral patterns were blocked because of just no room at the end.
Or weather.
Yeah,
That
weather
gets
kind of
it.
affects everybody.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't want to, I just want, I'm just pausing, I don't want
Yeah.
to keep going on until everybody really feels like
That's
Right.
fine.
we're good with this.
Mhm.
I think the other thing that's probably worth just throwing in there, so we all keep it in our minds, is that on the cost report, you can claim lease payments, and you can, or you can claim interest expense, but you can't claim both, in the scenario of this, of common interest, common control. But, under the alternative, which is the management services, you can claim both your interest expense and your, whatever you pay for operations. So that's kind of it's not a lease, but it's kind of, that's the other dollars flow. Both of those can be claimed. So the management affiliation agreement is the alternative that we need to kind of start going down the exploration, and which we introduced the last time that we met. And so under a management affiliation agreement, the district remains the owner and remains the legal operator of the hospital. So that means the cost report remains under the district's name. So now you see, you continue to have the tying of who's paying the interest expense and who's filing the cost report, so you get all that money back. And then Overlake is engaged through contract to operate the hospital on behalf of PhD. So they are given management and operations authority within a district-approved budget. So the budget that you all are getting ready to approve in November will be the budget that they would operate under
Within.
in 2020. And it is a risk-based agreement. So it's 50-50. So if there are gains, they're shared 50-50. If they are losses, they are shared 50-50. And so that's back to the point Emma was bringing up about not becoming a treat and ship facility.
Yeah.
So it's a great point, and that's where that risk-based aspect to this engagement is really important, because it keeps the business here. It keeps motivation for the business.
Well, the only thing is, I would think the first few years is gonna be loss, right?
I don't know if it's gonna be that bad,
Each
there's enough
system
people here
flow.
already.
If you look at your
Familiar.
net, at your net position change, their experience will probably be like ours is, in that, we have a very little, very, very tiny margin that we operate on. Sometimes it's a plus and sometimes it's a minus. So
Two
yeah,
different
that would be
ones.
they'll have that same experience initially, and they know that, so.
Would sharing that loss ever put our bond payments at risk, or our ability to make our payments at risk?
No, Steve has done a lot of tight calculations on that with that very question in mind. And when you look at the trust agreement, we've made sure that there's language in what's currently kind of penciled around the trust agreement, that trust agreement will always have to support the bonds, the revenue bonds. So I apologize, this is kind of busy up here, but I thought it might be helpful to look at the middle column, the lease operating concept, which is kind of I said the former, and then the management affiliation concept, which is the current conversation, and just doing some comparisons to see what's the same and what's slightly different. And I did a poor job, obviously. I intended to make the differences in green, and that's not very obvious. So anyway, we've been really relying, it's been really helpful to say what's it similar to. And so the one before we said is really similar to the agreement that Swedish and Stevens reached. And so this one that we're talking about now is more similar to what Evergreen and Valley Monroe reached. Really more similar, but not exact. So just make sure you hear me say that, not exact, but more similar.
Well, as I wrote, Stevens and Swedish, the agreement between them was that Swedish was going to come in with $90 million over a 10-year period. We're getting no cash out of these guys.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. They do have some plans for some capital investments. Yeah,
Oh, I'm anxious to hear.
yeah. It doesn't have a $90 million on it, but they do have intentions of doing
Okay.
capital investments.
Yeah, and as long as I'm finances. One of the things that bothers me, and I've heard from other people, is our people in our hospital district pay taxes on their property. People in the Overlake area, the patients and so forth, they don't pay any taxes. And I think they're all aware of that, but I just feel to get a level playing field, that Overlake should make a payment in lieu of taxes to be at least equal to the taxes that our people pay. Then we have a level playing field.
Hold that. I think as we get a little farther, I think you'll find that there's some partial satisfaction in what's being proposed. Maybe not fully, but partial satisfaction.
Partially.
You're fine. I just don't want to jump there, but I'll make sure to come back and point out that thought. Just to go through here, and the real assets owner, in both scenarios is the district. That doesn't change at all. We've said in the LOI that we wanted Overlake's branding to be a part of this. That doesn't change at all between either of these. The business owner or the business, the primary operator in the prior version, that was going to be passed over to Overlake. That will be retained by the district in this scenario. Management decisions in both we're going to be Overlake. The concept of oversight of the agreement in the former scenario, we had talked about an affiliation committee that would just oversee and make sure that things were going well, but it was going to be hard to conceive of having really any powers or authority. In this concept, that affiliation actually, instead of a committee, is an affiliation board that does have some responsibilities, some authority, and some powers embedded within it. The employer of the staff in the former model was going to be Overlake, so all of our employees were going to be transferred over to Overlake employment. In this new model, they'll remain hospital district employees. So again, just less messy in the transitions. The name on all transactions in the former would have reverted to Overlake, but in this scenario, it will stay district, will be the name on all transactions. When there will be the funds that flow from Overlake to the district, in the prior arrangement were going to be the lease payments only. But in the new scenario, there will be a lease payment, so capital investments will be there, which is what you're bringing up of monies that they would invest in. So investing capital, and now what is that is going to be based on what is the needs, what are we wanting to develop. So is it a capital investment of an electronic medical record that is shared between the two organizations? Is it an expansion of our procedural space so that they can bring procedurals here? Maybe that would be the capital investment. Is it extending because we're maximizing on our bed capacity and we need to add some observation beds? So that might be a capital investment. So it's really very open, it would based on the need, but there's an acknowledgement that it is part of the process.
So
Go ahead.
what does it mean to supplement 50% of net losses? Our net losses or their net losses?
The net losses of the business.
Business.
Of the
Okay, as a whole.
business hospital, so if there are losses, then Overlake will contribute 50% of those losses,
Okay.
because that's their risk that they take on.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And
Thank
then,
you.
David has a question, but I'll just drop you.
I don't see
one
that as
more.
being any difference. I would think that they would have to do some capital investment anyway, with or without a lease, And I don't see that as being a positive. I think it's just sort of I would think they would do whatever necessary to invest. So this capital investment as being a positive, I don't think that you can say that. I think that they would do it anyway.
Okay.
And so what we are going to be doing is now losing 50%, or we're open to losses. So with no guarantee of the lease payment being paid, basically. And I also see a problem when we get to the couple more down too. So I do see that as a problem, that now we're taking on more of the
Financial responsibility.
yeah, I think so. And I don't think that this is something that I would be real happy with.
Talk more about what you see as, we actually added financial risk.
Well, if they want to come up with 10 million into the hospital and improve it, that's fine. I would be happy with taking 50% of the losses. But that's not what it's going to be about. It's going to be whatever they feel is helpful to them. And they could maybe put nothing into the hospital. We don't know. Maybe a bed or two. Remember, this
Yeah.
critical access is going to net them $1 to $2 million a year in savings by shipping a lot of their patients over here that normally, ones that at least live around the area would be probably the best bet. And I have to jump down to the length of term as a problem, because let's just say, we're in our fifth year coming up. They have for 10 more years, pretty much the best years of this building's life is
Right
gonna
now.
be gone.
You're
Yeah,
right.
it'll be gone
And
then.
now we're gonna have to do
Appreciate it.
remodeling, reinvest after 10 years. And if they go, well, we used it, we'll just throw it away, because it's less incentive for them to reinvest at the end of the 10-year term.
The life
I almost want to have
expectancy.
it a 5-year or 6-year term. And the reason is they're gonna go, well, they'll have less of a chance to understand the long-term issues, and they're gonna either fish or cut bait at that point, and they'll know or not, and they're not gonna use up the building's value, so to speak. Because we depreciate it on paper much more than what the value depreciates. But I would be willing to bet in 10 years, most hospitals are 25-year longevity, that's it. Because we have to do really big investment in the hospital, revamp, get up to the standard quality of care in the area. So if you have to go back in 10 years and put $30 million in the hospital, renovate it to come up with the standard of care for this area again, that would be, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah,
I
I think
wouldn't
so.
want that to happen, because it seems like a lose-lose situation.
I don't think that you're gonna have it decimated and have to come in and do a gutting and a repair.
Well,
They have to look
you know,
at it.
I'm just looking at most hospitals, I mean,
Tell me about the most hospitals. Well, how many hospitals around here?
the one that we had was gone in 20 years.
What
It
was
was
the
out,
older-
lived its life out at the
Yeah,
end
it was
of
ne-
1990.
But it didn't have some good architecture, I don't
But I
think.
think that when we've talked to those who have come in and worked on the old hospital, they actually spoke about how solid it was and it was handed off in really good shape.
Oh,
Just
yeah,
had
no
good
doubt,
showings.
no
Yeah.
doubt, but it just couldn't be a hospital, you couldn't add on to it, you can't build from the top
Correct.
down,
That's right.
you know?
That's
Correct.
another
And so
problem.
things were not, we tried, we spent
Yeah.
4 or 5 million, wasted 4 or 5 million in looking
that
at plan, and
Yeah.
looking at just devising plans to do something with
But
the
that
hospital.
building's
this
been
one?
there, so they should have built up some equity too, right?
Which,
The building,
the old
that old building. The old
Which building, this building?
No, the old building.
So,
I think he's talking equity, I think he's talking just structure.
yes, structure. So, the type of medical care in 10 years or 15 or whatever, 10 years is gonna be different. So, it's changing more in the medical field, you know, than any other field, certainly more than the law, because we still rely on 1887 for property rights. So, you know, so it really, I have a real big issue on this, is handing off a building that may or may not be, you know, worthy of reoccupying again.
Would you go so far as to say that 10 years is about the worst point?
No, I don't
How
think
many
that.
been in Harvard
But
Hill
the reason is I want to ask,
Swedish or
what if
Ballard General?
that I have to tell you, the hospitals that are around in Seattle, those hospital buildings have been there forever. And except Cabrini, that's the only one that's gone. Swedish has been there since I was a kid. Ballard's been there since I was a kid. I mean, those, they keep them, they
But the
keep them up.
condition is not like,
But
Their conditions, they
they're-
upgrade them all the time, they fix
Yes,
them all the
they
time.
remodel them all the time and upgrade them, as you say.
You know what I didn't like about the other hospital? The narrow halls. I was so used to wide halls at Harborview, wide halls at Cabrini, wide, great big halls where you can get 2 stretchers and 2 gurneys going by, and isolation equipment outside.
Yeah,
You didn't have that over there.
I know our staff commented on that. No, but what about going the other direction in the sense, what if we said the term is going to be 30 years? And that means a real buy-in and get over this hump of taking advantage of the young building. And they make a real commitment. What if we talked about 30 years?
Well, we only have 25 years of all of our payments for our bonds, so
Yeah.
that's all we'd
we
have
don't
to do.
extend, but.
I just, don't want to fail in the taxpayer obligation.
Right.
You're-
All of, some of the numbers are just kind of, they've been put on the table for conversation.
Okay.
That none of this that we're talking about today is kind of hard and fast, it's a starting place for the
Not engraved in
conversation.
stone, huh?
So in fact, we've even had, with them, had this conversation about 10, 15, 20 years, you know, and so the 10 came about, in fact, we pushed back and said 15 or 20, because I felt like it was, you know, that really said you're jumping into this for the long haul. And then it fell back to 10, only because they said, you know, at that point in time, what if we're ready, you know, we've demonstrated, because they anticipated the 7 to 8 year mark is when they were going to demonstrate whether, you know, the likelihood that they will no longer be critical access dependent. So they actually wanted to be positioned to do a renewal or a purchase at the time of the revenue bonds.
Well, why don't they
But
just
can
have
do
an
that
open
anytime.
purchase option
do
in
that.
it at any year
Again,
and have a long-term 20-year?
These are all the
So-
pieces of feedback that they're waiting for us to bring to them. Yes.
I think
None
it-
of this is hard and fast.
25-year operating agreement with the option at any point to buy the hospital. I don't care.
That sounds good to me.
That way, they're covered for our bondholders, our taxpayers.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I'm afraid,
Of the 10.
Yeah.
because,
So longer better.
yeah, longer the better with the option of purchase at any time, you know.
At any time, or? 'cause we can-
I don't know
Sure.
where it would be a
We can
bad
put in
part
a-
about that. I
Or-
don't know.
Because the price will determine whether it goes through. It can be at any time.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
price will determine whether it goes through or not.
Yeah. And I don't have an issue with them purchasing the hospital in 5 years, you know. That's not an issue. As long as we can be guaranteed that those bonds will be paid off. And that's the biggie. And if they buy it, there's gonna be healthcare in this area. There's gonna be good healthcare. Maybe you don't think Overlake's that good, but I think you're a lot better than you
It's
think.
not me, it's the rating organizations.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't want to see us take down our sign and put up overlay on a short-term proposition. First of all, that thing's worth $50,000. Moving it and storing it's another $50,000. If they decide to leave in 5 years, we got all that debt. And it's confused the people because we're switching signs.
Just put theirs on top of it, that's all.
So you brought that up before, and so it's been captured, and we are so far away from making decisions
Okay.
like that. But, and in fact, the conversations have been from Overlake side saying, when we get to that point, that we Overlake are gonna say, don't throw away everything that you have. You want to maintain the reputation that you do have that's positive. So how do we do that? How do we continue to capture the good name that we have, yet layer on top of it the good Overlake name? And get rid of the bad name that people think that we have. It is such
Or
a mixed
what
bag.
Overlake has. Overlake has a bad name in some
So
areas.
somehow if we keep them both together, maybe that's how we win.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, so that solution, it demands a solution, but it is so far away from actually figuring that out. But you brought that point up before, and I've got that jotted down.
I know,
in our
I feel
notes.
very strongly about that.
And I've got it jotted down in the notes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, those
But
are
I
my
never heard
comments
of
on
Overlake
this.
having a bad
Anyway.
reputation or
Okay, I got
bad
it.
name.
Hmm?
I've
These
never
are things
heard of
we needed to
Overlake
tease out.
Yeah.
having a bad name or a bad reputation. I never heard of it around here, at least in my.
Or the other
Yeah.
thing, if you did want to go with a 10-year, that there's a $3 million in it, and a $5 million renovation fund waiting for us if, something like that were to happen. Something
$5 penalty.
Somebody always wants me.
In your own mind.
It's a short time.
You'll get back on it.
You're just
So you know what I'm saying, that if, our $5 million renovation fund, that
Deposit.
if they don't want to buy it, we get it,
To undo
yeah. And
whatever.
then if they don't wanna buy it, then it's in addition to this 10 million.
Jack it up.
But you still the longer better.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is where we can bring in architects to tell us, all right, here are your options. And the most advantageous to you is 10 years worth a deposit, 20 years, 30 years. Bring in architects to see what the situation is with the building, what it would cost to do these changes and renovations at various points along the way. You know, we need some expert advice there. We can't just pick a number, that's all I'm saying.
I mean, if they have the money sitting there and it's theirs if they wanna buy it, right? And it's gaining interest in a trust fund, right? That should not be a problem for them.
You mean the trust fund that's set?
No, this is a
Okay.
separate fund for the building renovations at the end of their management.
That's not actually how we position it. That's for our restart. If they
Well,
walk
for
away,
their-
it's for our restart, but if they buy it,
Well, if they don't buy it,
right, if they don't.
Yeah.
But if
You
they
see.
do buy it,
If they don't-
a lot of that trust money needs to stay with the district.
all right, well, this is an addition. That's just the startup stuff. I'm talking about renovation for the building fund. That's an additional amount of money that they can have if they buy the building to renovate.
That is also held in the trust account?
Yeah, separate. That's just for the building remodeling. I think that should be, I don't know, it should be probably around 5 million.
Now, is that money they put in, or is that money that taxpayers
They
put
put
in?
in.
They
They
put in.
put in.
It's
It's set aside.
So this money, I would look at, all of these hospitals been around, check about their last remodel. See how much that costs. I bet it was in the 50, 60 million.
Oh, Overlake's been remodeling and
Oh, I
building
know.
continually.
I'm
What
just
you
saying,
do.
what's a remodel for a hospital cost per square foot for 60,000 square foot? Is that what this is, 60?
I remember. I think it's a
I
little
don't
more than that.
remember the exact number.
So I'm just wondering what a remodel cost of a hospital would be for
See what I can
60,000.
find, but that number will be so
Changed.
meaningless.
Yeah, because.
Especially if it's 10 years
every
later.
year,
10
are
years from
different.
now, and then depending on what you do, if you're
Percentages.
building a
Or what
clinical
your needs
space
are.
or operative space, that's an entirely different number than just
Just roughly, I
patient care
guess,
space. And
just an
that's all it
approximate.
will, that's all it will be, is like very, very rough.
Yeah,
Well, in today's dollars, you know.
It's okay, even in today's dollars. I'm happy to do it, I just wanna make sure that we realize that it will be really, really
Well,
hard to have.
you
any
might want to look at a
sense.
couple of recent ones.
Oh, happy to,
Well,
but again, it'll be dependent on what they did.
And bring in a
Right,
consulting
and just look at what
architect.
they did
But
on
I-
each remodel and kind of go some median.
Well, they're doing an incredible remodel right now at Overlake. Have you driven by there
It's not a
recently?
remodel,
it's a phase,
new
phase,
building.
the new building.
What is it?
It's a
They want
brand
to
new
build,
build,
yeah.
so that'll be a totally different cost structure than a
Right.
remodel.
Thing is, they're going to the second or third phase of that wing, that part of that building.
Yeah, they're building that
Yeah.
whole new building out, yeah.
So anyway, it's just
The third, second.
thoughts. I mean, it's not like we have to, but,
Right now, all we're doing is gathering thoughts and initial
Right.
responses and initial reactions.
so they know
and
that
those are important.
we're concerned about what might happen at the end of 10 years.
Yeah, they know that we have had those conversations, and what would it cost for
We are
us
very
to
aware of the business concept here.
assume it back from them, that we have taken that into a deep dive on that. Let's keep this going.
Yep, all right.
So, just that, we've been talking about the finances and stuff, and so just trying to this pictorial arrangement of kind of functionally how it could look. So while the district has engaged Overlake, the work actually happens through this affiliation board. Now, part of the reason, and Overlake will be, they're super transparent with this, the reason why they're attracted to this idea of an affiliation board is because the things that our public hospital district are a little worrisome to a non-public hospital district, so public records request and such. So for them to be able to offer just a little bit of distance to protect them from the public records request is of great importance to them. So that's a lot of what's motivating having the affiliation board.
Why is it 3 OHMC plus 2?
Two from
Why is
public.
not even number? So there could be a breaking vote or something.
Yeah, why can't it be
Yeah,
three?
even, 3
Or
and 3.
even 5 for us and 3
That
for
shows
them?
our secondary all
We
the
can't,
you know.
time.
That's you can't do that, more than 2 commissioners, otherwise
Yeah.
it's up for.
Otherwise, what?
You
It
can't
can't.
have more than
Two
2 commissioners,
commissioners.
because
Yeah.
it'll open it up to public disclosure.
You're a public meeting.
Open
Act.
public
Well,
meeting.
You violate your public
I
meeting.
think they're gonna be open to public meeting laws anyway.
Because they're
I think
operating
they-
a PhD.
I think that they're going to be, they want to escape that, that's why they never became a public hospital district. But I think if they go into this agreement, they're going to be subject to the open meeting laws and the public disclosure laws of the PDA. So that's my personal opinion. I have to research that more, but I would be surprised if they're not going to be subject to those laws because of this affiliation.
So they've been doing some of their own research, and so this creates a greater comfort for them. They are not ignoring the fact that whatever part of the affiliation board they play does expose that portion to public records. It's just the things that are not associated with Snoqualmie Valley Hospital that they're wanting to try and avoid having to be part of the Public Records Disclosure Act.
Well, I appreciate that they want to be comfortable, but I think we have to consider our comfort also. That what are we going to be comfortable with? I mean, we built this hospital, we went in debt to this hospital, sold it to the community, you know. We've done a heck of a lot more for this hospital than they ever will.
Absolutely. So that would be why we continue on to make sure that there's always representation
From the board.
from the board.
Yeah.
So
Well-
the affiliation board having 2 public hospital district representatives, and whether that's 2 of you all, if you identify 2 representatives, and that's really open right now. So that'd be one other thing to talk about as we move forward. If it was important to lock that in, that it's only board members that are eligible to sit on the affiliation board, if you like to keep it open as to if you want to be,
Yeah, public.
whether it could be somebody else you identify. And that is not, that we're a long ways from making that decision, but just things to think about. That affiliation board there in the middle, just to outline some of the roles that would have. So over the left-hand column is the district. So this is the responsibilities that you all would continue to have. And so there are all of those things that are described under the WAC that you can, the WACs that you have to continue to do. You know, so you still have to approve an annual budget, you still have to
Collect the taxes.
pass the levy and collect the taxes and incur the state audits. You still need to have commissioner elections, you still need to have a superintendent.
So
that
what
you're
is,
hiring
how
interim.
does the superintendent and commissioners play into what we were just seeing moments ago? I mean,
In that,
yeah, like affiliation board, 3 from Overlake and 2 from the public health
that's
district.
a great question. So the district over on the left continues to do all the things that you all do right now, except operate a hospital, except actually operate the hospital.
Okay, so.
Own it.
So some of the things we do is we go to committees. We have a finance committee, we have a medical committee, we have other facilities committee, we have committees. So will we still have those committees? Or because Overlake is actually in charge of the building and everything, do they do the committees?
You
That's up to
all-
us.
You all
No.
will have
It's
to
not-
decide,
yeah.
because the committees that you have is because the group
Right.
Yeah.
identified
Well,
those 3
they're not
committees.
really in charge of the building. They are in charge of hospital operations.
Operations.
It's
Okay, so
totally-
we still need facilities no
It's
matter what.
separate.
But they, as being in charge of operations, then they are also incurred obligations to keep it
The building up to
survey
snuff.
ready, to
Yeah.
do all of the maintenance of the building, that's all part of the agreement. They need to be
It's whatever we
responsible for
write
that.
in.
Yeah, but they still need to be responsible
Right.
for those things.
Yeah.
You were asking what does it look like, so your population health initiatives that
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
become so important, for you all as you look for opportunities, those still remain on your
Right.
side. Managing East Campus, just all the practicalities
Yeah.
there, because that's not
ours.
part of this.
It's not part of it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Surface water.
So that's why we
management
need
fees.
that, we still need a superintendent to
Right.
look into all of our separate operations
Yeah, 'cause you
outside of, that's how we
Yeah, so
are going to
that left
exist.
column, there continues to be a significant
Right.
amount of
Responsible.
district business
District
that
business.
needs to be maintained and managed and done well.
That's what the homes,
Right.
surplus property, stormwater.
Yeah.
Over on the far right are the things that Overlake would be engaged to do, and that's exactly what Commissioner Pollard said. It's management and operations, and, providing the resources from, as necessary from within their own system for management and operations, and then obligated to adhere to the budget that they're offered, and then whatever, they would be the ones who would be executing purchase services agreement as part of the operations. And then that affiliation board is where things come together in the middle. So the chief administrative officer, the affiliation board would hire and term that, so that would has input from both
Both
groups.
sides, yeah.
The strategic plan, the affiliation board, because as Commissioner Swicker was just bringing up, the community health needs assessment, you want to make sure that it is front and center in things that are being done in this building.
Yeah.
And so that affiliation board will help keep that up and going. The medical staff approval process needs a place to go. And then any non-budget expenses beyond a certain amount need a place to get an approval process. So again, right there in the center where you've got shared risk as a part of it as well.
What is the interaction between this new setup and the East Side Health Board, or what do you
Health
call it?
Network?
Health
HN?
Network, yeah. What would be the interaction between this kind of a setup and the East Side Health Network?
It would be really quite similar to the way it is right now, because that relationship is when we come together to do contracts and share quality and what have you. And so that would continue to happen with the hospital that's being operated by Overlake and EHN. These lists here are absolutely incomplete. They're just kind of starting ideas, just to kind of give ideas to.
Yeah, I don't know where this
concepts.
fits in here, but one of the things that has bothered me is the fact that Overlake would be in charge of admissions. Now, maybe that's the way it has to be if they're going to do operations. But there's nothing that would prevent Overlake from sending to us their non-economical patients, rather than sending them to a hospital like they described having to do. They could send to us their non-positive economic patients. And I just think that the community ought to have some say there.
Well, it's that, those things are under operations because a decision to admit, there's an enormous number of requirements that you have to meet, the admission requirements and admission criteria that have to be met. So just the business, the industry has some side
Right.
rails on that to
But
begin with.
referral may be a little different, like they could refer from Overlake to us patients that are not economical for Overlake.
Which is back to.
It's
what
not
Emma
gonna-
brought
yeah,
up
I don't think
earlier,
that-
which is they
yeah,
have to
right.
incur, if those are decisions that get made, they actually will
They're-
have a certain
yeah.
amount of consequences that they suffer at the checkbook level.
But-
Yeah, they're gonna take
They
financial
have to
risk
really-
just like that.
They have to make appropriate
Well,
business decisions.
that's just
on
like
those
this
things.
business of having two Snoqualmie people or two district people and three Overlake people. 90% of it depends on the attitude of the parties involved. If they have a cooperative attitude, we're going to get along just fine. If they don't, we got trouble, and we may end up in court.
As is the case for the 5 of you.
As is any
I mean, it's
organization.
just that
Well,
it's-
I do think it's
Such
a
a
business
slide.
decision, they will
Yeah,
refer their
business
Medicare
decision.
patients here, period. If
They
are-
should,
yeah.
because.
So that
Yeah.
extra
Right.
percentage.
for
Here's the
outpatients.
caveat to
Yeah.
that. All of their Medicare patients coming from, they live from maybe Bellevue.
Mhm.
And so there's nobody, in the you know, from the community that's utilizing the hospital, it's people from Bellevue. That's one thing I would be concerned about.
That
There
local
wouldn't be
folks
room.
are not offered a priority? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
In the way that we offer a certain priority? Got a way to bring that in.
Yeah.
That's why the hospital's here, to meet the needs of this local community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if,
Prioritize.
let's say, an investigative reporter for Seattle Times or someone shows that this hospital is full of Bellevue people and there's no room for
Locals.
district people,
If they write about it, it'd become an issue right away.
well, yeah, but
Yeah.
there is that chance that the hospital with only 25 beds could be filled up with Bellevue people and leave no room for our local folks.
That's not what we want.
I'll think about
Yeah,
how
that's
we can
a-
construct
A way to make sure that the admission has a priority. Just a reminder for all of us that when we think about our contact points with our community, you know, we have 15 to 1,800 contacts with our community through our clinics every month, month after month. Whereas our hospital, you know, inpatient, 25 contact points, you know, if you have 25 admissions over the course of the month. So by comparison, our service to our community is really through our outpatient services. So our clinics, and then all of the outpatient contacts, so the VA lab or imaging or rehab, which is really where our community gets their greatest benefit, because not that many of them. You know, even when we looked at the statistics, you know, Health Fact came in and did the statistics for us about what happens to the people that live in our community and when they're hospitalized, why are they hospitalized, and how many of those could actually come into a community hospital. And it still wasn't a huge number. It was definitely a larger number than is the case right now. But it still wasn't a huge number because we live in a pretty healthy community. But it's aging, so more and more of them will need to come in.
One of the things I think that we would have benefited from all along the way over years is the source of our patients. We don't, the board does not get a report on where our patients are coming from.
Just ask, we can bring it to you.
I'm
Can we see in
talking
the
about a regular
assessment?
report, so we could gear any outreach to areas where we're not getting patients. You know, there's lots of uses for that data. The point is, we've never gotten it. I'd like to know.
I think it isn't it in the needs assessment, some of where people come from?
Well, I think he's asking specifically
Yeah,
the
community
patients
users.
here, what their sources are.
Oh, by the way, what is the status of the needs assessment?
It's in process.
In process. It's been in process for a long time.
No, it hasn't. It
It's
just
not
started.
gonna come out
It just
until the end of
started.
November.
Oh, it's going to
Or
come
early
out at the end of
December.
November?
Or December?
End of
December
November, early
meeting.
December, yeah.
You have to land in
Oh,
the year.
okay, because I hope we have not relied on the community network.
So as I reported to you last month, we have our own engagement,
Yes.
and they're working on it right now. And I signed it just before the last board meeting.
Okay, well, there's some
So-
talk about benefiting from the
We did.
the needs assistance.
Yes.
The problem is that they include a different area.
They did, and so,
Yeah.
but we're still leveraging the fact that they already have all that data in their hands, so they're not having to go and acquire it again. So that's to our benefit, so we don't have to pay for new acquisition. Yes. So we do know what the districts are, and so we've been able to accommodate for excluding some of the space that is not in our district. And actually, there's some other things to be added in.
I think you were there, I was there, you were there, how many of us were there? When we saw what Snoqualmie Valley Community Network had.
Right, but I think now we're talking about our own engagement.
Yeah, I understand.
And you probably have other things to add to or take away from this list, but just kind of throwing some things out. one of the positives, and we'll actually bring you a funds
Chart.
flow, next time we meet, because it's not ready to be shown, because there's still some details, it's got too many to be figured out on it right now. But the one thing we can say is that the population health dollars, so when we looked at it, the most recent time we looked at that, I think Jen, you were really quick to identify that, oh my goodness, it's gonna be actually a few years before there's any money of substance to actually do something with. And in the scenario that's being proposed, there's dollars available immediately.
Yeah.
So, I put that at the top, because I thought that was probably important for you all to
Yeah.
have there. We already talked about the interest expense can remain an allowable cost. Repeating what we've already talked a lot about. The management affiliation option has no certificate of need requirement with it, because
That's a
there's no
very
change in
important point.
ownership. Yeah.
Very, and it also speeds things up
Speeds
tremendously.
things up and lowers the cost tremendously.
Yeah, that's good to know.
So if it feels otherwise the same, it is possible, for we've been talking about the end of 2020, but unless we run into some challenges, you're unable to kind of come to an agreement, like you said, it all depends on everybody's attitude. We could be in early Q2, we may actually be able to get to a definitive agreement. And then the concept about the affiliation board actually having a purpose and some authorities that the affiliation committee really wasn't going to have. It was just going to be kind of a watchdog scenario, whereas this actually has some roles. If that is valuable, and this, and Commissioner Paula, this now is back to the thing that you were talking about earlier, which is tax dollars. This is a really, really high level of concept of how the funding, how the calculations will be done. Again, very high level, and this is where we're going to come back with some details at a future meeting. But their concept is to have the adjustment, the risk sharing, 50-50 split, that's going to be based on dollars that are associated with operations.
Versus
So-
tax dollars?
Correct.
That's nice.
Tax dollars are excluded from this calculation. So if you see the line A there is the, what we are used to calling our audited change in net position, so that's that bottom line. And for us, that bottom line has tax dollars in it.
But it won't here.
So, and what our bottom line has is the tax dollars that were in excess of what already went to pay off the LTGO. So what is being proposed is that audited change in net position, and then you exclude those excess tax dollars. Those should not contribute to the success or not success of overlay. So those come out, and so just
You mean of the
sidebar.
hospital?
No, just out of this calculation.
Yeah, but you said of overlay. You're talking about.
Their hospital operations.
Okay.
The operations for this facility.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And so I'll just do a quick sidebar, and that, where are the funds going to come immediately for population health? It's those tax dollars that they pull out. So a portion of them will be identified as being immediately available for population health, and then a portion of it going into, to start building up that trust fund. But, and the portion concept is as far as we are right now. So then that adjusted net income from operations only is where you're starting to do your calculations. And then some of that income may also be from dollars that Overlake gave the hospital to do a capital purchase. So let's come up with something. They gave money to purchase a renovation to add a second procedure suite. Something like that. So that would get pulled out because that would be a credit that they gave, because that had contributions as well. And then you've got your final adjusted net income, and that's where it's split 50-50. So not a lot of shell game going on.
Of moving dollars back and forth for
Yeah,
different things.
Pretty straightforward.
Well, when the Swedish Edmunds was on the prospect of a merger, and I mentioned the $90 million over 10 years, they didn't restrict that to capital investment because they were, what's the name that they affiliated with?
Stevens?
Stevens was in deep financial trouble, and money from Swedish went to reducing their risk and their troubles. You know, it wasn't all for capital investment. And I just want to see Overlay give us some money.
I think a large part of it was for capital investment because
Yes, a large
the
part,
hospital
but
was
they also
really
used it
going
to pay off some of their indebtedness. And we don't have any indication here that Overlake's going to give us anything to help us reduce our indebtedness. I don't know, maybe Mr. Spivers.
I'm listening.
You know, at one point when we talked about once a name over there in Yakima,
Astria.
we said they're going to have to do a good faith deposit or something, a performance deposit. Well, I don't think we need a performance deposit, but we do need to get the kind of support that Stevens received from Swedish, where some of this money is non-restricted to capital, and we can just reduce our indebtedness. I'm very concerned about the overall
What are
long-term
you,
indebtedness.
what would you propose to them as an amount that they should give and the why? I mean, like, what would that word track?
Well, where's the logic? The
Yeah,
logic is
just the word track that goes around it, yeah.
that our people, if you look at your county tax assessments for your house, we're paying taxes. One thing, this is just one approach, but one thing is that they could make a payment to the hospital district, since we're all in this thing together in a sense financially, equivalent to what our people are paying in property taxes to King County, coming back to us. That's one, I think, somewhat logical approach. There are others.
Okay. So they would match or pay?
Well, how much are we getting, Steve, from property taxes approximately?
About 3.9 million.
Okay, that'll do.
Make it 5 million.
Well, we gotta pay debt with it, Eugene.
Yeah, it's all,
gotta
much of
what?
that's
We gotta pay
committed
debt with it. We gotta
It's
pay off
committed.
debt.
to the bonds.
Well,
Which the other portion, so we pay debt, and then the other
Yeah.
part that isn't used for debt, they actually are acknowledging that should be ours to keep.
Yeah.
That they shouldn't.
So then we
well,
can use
not only
programs.
should that be ours to keep, but they should give us equivalent amount
Why?
to produce a level playing field.
But we don't have a level playing field, just to start with.
Why not?
Because
We're-
Overlake is Overlake and we're Snoqualmie Valley and we're 25 beds versus 200 beds. I don't know, what are they?
Yeah, but,
Something over.
yeah, but nevertheless, we should create a level playing field so that, what I've heard from people is, we're paying taxes, but the people that go to Overlake are paying no taxes.
Well, you know why, don't you? They had a vote. They voted just like the community here. Do you want to have a hospital district? And they voted no.
That's right.
But that's history.
Yeah, that's history, but
history.
that's what
That's
happened.
old history,
Yeah.
but that's exactly correct.
So,
But one
But maybe
reason
the
that
level
they,
playing field, go ahead.
I'm just going to say one reason they didn't want to become a public hospital district is they did not want to be subject to the laws specific to public hospital districts, like the Open Meetings Law and the Public Records Act, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't matter. I just feel that somehow Overlake, as rich as they are, they should give us some kind of offset there to make up for the fact that our people are paying property taxes and their people are not. I don't know. What do you think,
Well,
Dave?
there's also though the concession that we're asking that they make, which would be to give preference to local patients.
I don't know whether we can do that.
We can see. Why not you?
Well,
And I can tell you that
Sometimes
I
it can
do
be
know
arbitrary.
of another facility in Illinois, and I only know this because years ago, we were talking about going into a business venture with Cancer Treatment Centers of
Yeah,
America. And so I was sent back to do recon.
Okay.
And in Zion, Illinois, back where they had done an affiliation with a community hospital there. And so that was part of the agreement, was that they will always provide admission space for the local people. So it,
Well, Jen, maybe
There's
that's not a bad idea. And that is that people from the hospital district get priority.
I wish I could take credit, I think it came from Commissioner Spikers.
Okay.
we're talking about it.
but that's great.
That's a
Thank you
legitimate
for letting me,
thing.
thank you for letting me push on the tell me the logic, because that'll be really, really helpful to be able to do a word track to
Well, you
around
can
this,
tell
because
them
it captures what
that
you're
some
saying.
people in Snoqualmie are making that comparison.
And they don't want to go to Bellevue. A lot of people here want to stay in the valley.
Absolutely.
Which, to keep that circular going, many times the reason why we have to relocate them is because we don't have the specialty services here.
Yes.
And with the affiliation, we have the specialty services and can have the right
I
care in the
agree.
right place. So it does all kind of start touching on
It
each
does.
other.
Okay,
Okay.
that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
A lot more details here. Thank you for keeping us on time. I, can, the agenda on the left, which is the kind of standard agenda that this meeting always goes under, was constructed around the former agreement, the lease operating agreement. And many of those go away, like the land and building leases and the lease transferences and the certificate of need, which would mean that our new agenda would just really focus on the definitive agreement and the trust development and the timeline check, of which the timeline's gonna have to be reconstructed now if we keep going down this path, and regardless, because they would have this pause. So the old timeline also is already gonna shut out of the water as well.
Are there any additional due diligence categories we need to think about with changing the structure of the agreement?
Yes, there are, and so some of those, starting to say there's a lot of details that we have to work through, and I think that's where you're saying is around the more
Yeah.
due diligence, if we look at it differently. So even starting at the last one, which is now going back and pushing on the bond and the LTGO covenants to confirm just detailed line by line by line that there's no conflicts. So, we have Piper Jaffray under contract, so they're already doing that. They've already, and the feedback has been they don't see any concerns, but that just stays a prominent question, because that's the last thing that we want to do. And again, there's still an enormous amount of work to be done and a lot of conversations to be had. So in no way is anything that we talked about set in stone. It just was a starting place for conversations, which is exactly what we had. So really, really helpful. Next month, so our November meeting, we anticipate having an agreement in hand, the first draft of an agreement, and really, pushing even harder than we've done now. And so I've asked Brian to come and be here
It would be nice.
for the next time, because you may have some deeper questions that really hit into
Just
the
a
legal
draft of the
issues.
definitive agreement that we're gonna
Yeah.
be dealing with.
It's supposed to, it's in work right now, and so by the next time that we meet for an affiliation work study, we should have something. And I'll make sure that you get it in hand, because you'll want to have a chance to read through it, and there won't be any last minute stuff going on
Is
with
that
that.
the 8th, or is that the following week? Do we push it to another special meeting?
That's on your agenda later.
Now, I remember talking about who is going to draft the definitive agreement. Are they doing it?
Yes.
Okay, because I remember that's what's discussed. Okay.
That gives them a lot of power.
I know.
Agreement.
It's cost, they're talking about the cost, that's the reason
Now,
that we
WAC is Washington Administrative
we
Code.
need to.
And
Short-term,
where are we
short.
exposed regarding the WAC? Where do we have to
Where-
comply?
We're not positioning the board to be in any exposure.
And it probably more should be appropriate RCW, the revised code of Washington.
Sorry.
Versus
thank you.
the WAC?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, I'll correct.
I'm
That's
more,
okay.
I'm more familiar with that.
Yeah, a WAC, as you know, is
Yeah, WAC
promulgation
is-
of the rules that are
right.
underneath the RCWs, but it's really gonna be
Translation.
the RCWs. The WACs get down to the nitty gritty
Right.
of the labor and industries and the number of hours you can work and all kinds of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will happily change it to our.
Yeah, I would reach back.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
To the
That's my
details.
shortcut.
Yeah.
a shortcut to meet regulation.
Yeah, so that, it is absolutely the intention to keep the district
45.
completely above board and in no way even close to being compromised in regard to those obligations.
Well, we'll see how they draft it.
Well, they can't even draft it to make it a risk.
I know.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's a no-go if it starts putting you all in a threatening position.
Yeah.
I think you're in a better position by having them drafted, because it's a whole lot easier to respond
Yeah.
It
to
is.
something than it is to create whole cloth.
Go ahead.
So when given the opportunity, I usually let the other party, you take the first cut. Now, if it's
Yeah.
bad, then you're gonna really draft it yourself anyway. But if it's anywhere close, it's much easier to work off of it, and you can see what their issues are. And it's easier to add your issues on than try and put it out there and then respond to theirs.
Yeah.
And they have a very large staff to do this.
Well, they actually contract out. They don't have in-house
Oh, is that
counsel.
right?
They do. They have a contract attorney as well. It's a larger law firm, of course. But we discussed this early on to
Yeah.
allow them to draft it.
Code Blue, 2211, Code Blue,
I
2211.
need to go because nobody's here.
Go.
And you guys are getting ready to eat.
Yeah, so should we go ahead and take a recess?
Oh,
Joe?
you're almost, you're done. I really don't have anything more to say.
Go.
Thanks.
Is it okay if I ask us to do a fast temperature check on this affiliation board? Reason being that I feel like this was a concession that they were gonna give us, something that we were excited about. Having a minority stake in a board with these really superficial responsibilities,
What page are you on, Jim?
in the middle. There's no page number.
What's it say? Which
It's like 5 or 6 from the back.
Yeah, right there. Is the foundation board.
Which is seen, this strikes me as like, okay, this is lovely, this is a nice to have, but it's no actual responsibility, it's no actual power because there's no voting power with only 2 versus 3 in case of a conflict. So I just want us all, am I reading that wrong, or do we all agree that this is not something that like we're super stoked about, it's just like, okay, this is part of the agreement, that's fine. But
Well, I brought it up earlier because I thought, why is there only two
Yeah.
PhD? I mean, we
Yeah.
were discussing it earlier.
Right.
And one of the reason was that, because if there's more than 2, it becomes, and since it's not, we're not open to
Open record.
public hearing or whatever. But the
Unless-
question is, the hospital is being operated by overlay, and we are still a public hospital district.
Mhm.
So that is a question whether, is that right?
Well,
Whether we will still be in compliance.
That's correct.
That is correct. See, that's where my question is earlier, but I don't think we went into the details of it.
It could be, you know,
But yes, you're
two
right.
existing board commissioners plus Karen, or plus Dr. Whitcop, or some other person that knows the day-to-day stuff going on
They
in the
belong
hospital.
to, after that, they become
Do they become
overlay.
overlay?
Every employee is.
Or whoever the
that's
superintendent is
business,
that we
the
end
way.
up hiring,
Our-
or something, or
that Maybe this, the higher
Ladies, I wanna say
superintendent will be.
You gotta speak one at a time. The rest of us can't even hear when you're both talking at the same time.
Well, this is discussion, this is work study session, okay?
But
That's
still,
the time, that's why we have this.
Everybody's here and it's hard to hear both
Okay.
of you, and I think you both have questions, things to
Yeah,
say.
Well,
but that's
here-
just my.
Steve, go
comment.
ahead. Go ahead.
Emma, on your
Sorry.
point on the employees, my understanding is the employees will remain district employees. And the contract will be
Yeah,
with
it's
overlay
right
to
here.
monitor the hospital with its district employees. So the employees will be district employees.
So we will be responsible for payroll for them as well?
Yeah.
So we'll have
Yeah.
somebody, chief financial officer of some sort, won't we?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
here, the
Yeah.
employer of the SVH staff would be us still.
Yeah.
So,
This is a couple pages prior.
One of the things you can do when you have a
So-
minority board, you can adjust the bylaws a
Yeah,
bit
we
to
need
be
to do
able
that.
to compensate for that.
Okay.
A lot of corporations do that.
That's a good
You
idea.
get more voting rights per board member, that kind of thing, so.
Requires
There's
super
also like
majority.
the list of responsibilities here are like meh, and like I said, like if we're cool with that, then that's fine.
Not
But
really.
we should not see this as like, you know, they're giving us such a great concession by allowing us to be on this board with no power.
Well,
I think that's
besides-
where you get the bylaws.
Yeah,
And you-
that's
you
what we just.
Make sure you have good bylaws to be able to have input on that board and not
Even
just a rubber
bylaws
stamp,
that govern
paper
this.
tiger
Right.
type of thing.
And when you're talking about 5 people, 3 of theirs, 2 of ours, a quorum is going to be 3. That means their 3 people as a quorum could do business without our involvement at all. We have to take care of that.
Is quorum established in bylaws?
It is.
Yes.
Okay. But even I was
Established.
saying though, even just
Alright.
governing these 6 items, big whoop.
Which ones? The tax dollars, approving an
Any of
annual
them.
budget, level, levy, and collect.
Oh, no, not the important stuff on the left.
Oh, what?
No, the stuff in the middle, I
Stuff in the
think we should just either tell me I'm wrong, or we should just all agree that this is like not
I
a
think-
ton of oversight.
I think the budget thing's a big deal, and I think that's what we're all elected to do, whatever has to do
No,
with.
in the middle.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm, says right top,
Yeah.
recommend budget, on the top of the middle, right? Then approval non-budget expenses beyond dollars to be determined, and that's tax dollars, I assume. And then, hire team, Snoqualmie Valley Hospital, CAO, what is that?
Chief Administrative Officer.
Oh, we'll hire somebody to do that.
Going back to Jen's,
Yeah.
I think you're asking, are we okay with this particular setup, 2 PhD? And I think if we were to be fair, to have 3 and 3, instead of, you said the superintendent could be part of the PhD rep, the one that we will hire.
Yeah.
That becomes the third party here. So that, I think, would resolve some of that question whether we should, is it fair? Yeah, I think it is, right? That,
Because we get to hire that person.
because,
Yeah,
that person
yes.
becomes PhD personnel, because we're hiring that superintendent,
No, that's,
right?
Yeah.
Instead of another commissioner to be part of it.
right.
So we
No,
only
that
need
would-
2 commissioners and that
That could be one way to
superintendent.
make it 3 and 3, if
Right.
you were to agree to that, or.
So going back,
Okay.
I think, don't you feel
So
comfortable with that? I
That
think
was
would be-
one of, that was, yes,
Yeah.
that was one of my 2 concerns. The
Yes.
other concern is this list of responsibilities, I do not think is like a ton of oversight, and if that's okay, then that's okay. I just wanted everyone to
We'll
recognize
look at the
that.
bylaw.
Just remember, Jen, that we can't have more than 2.
Right.
So,
No.
so that you can, again,
No, that's
structure the
Structure
bylaws
the
to
different-
compensate
yeah.
for any of that loss of power.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, because if we
Alright,
have 3,
I'm-
we can make decisions.
Talking about circles now.
I think you know that, she knows that, yeah, she understands that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
what was
you.
the second one?
Well, that was just it, like, so like, okay, I think we came to a place where we could figure out the 2
Okay.
versus 3,
Yeah,
but then these items,
Oh, okay, yeah, no authority. That's the second issue, yeah, I see. what you're saying.
and like, if we are okay with that, then we are okay with that, but I don't want us going in
But if
thinking
you
that
look
it's a
at,
ton.
they
So I
do
don't think
have
it's a ton.
authority, they
You think it
approve,
is?
they approve strategic plan, they do have,
Okay.
but the commissioners don't.
Okay.
They do, they approve strategic plan, so there's some authority there.
Okay. I
They
just want
hire,
everyone, I just want us to
they
look at this
still-
critically for a
yeah, yeah.
moment before just saying, okay, moving
Yeah.
on. All right.
Looking at critical, yeah.
Thank you,
there's-
Tim.
yeah.
You know, though, too, some of this we don't know until we start having to do it. I mean, you can always think that you know what something's gonna be like, but until we get there,
Yeah.
then it may look different than what we thought, either good or bad. That's kind of my
Thank
thing.
you for looking at this closer. Thank you, guys.
Would we gain anything by talking to Stevens, in the Stevens Swedish setup?
Are we gonna look like that setup, do you think? It sounds to me like
Somewhat.
you think it's gonna be pretty similar.
Somewhat like that. That's kind of the model as opposed to
Yeah.
the leasing
The
model.
executive director of Bergen was willing to take us
And,
up.
we might, they may have learned something
Yeah.
through, let's see, I think it's been 8 years of experience that they've had this.
Have they had it for a
Not
year?
that that was so
8
great.
years.
Were you hungry?
This went into effect in 2010.
Food is in the air, the smell of it.
So anyway, I just wondered if we might learn something
But
talking
it's
to
not
our.
likely that we are on this side of Evergreen Valley as well, right?
Couldn't
And,
have
this
did
is
this.
Stevens. So I don't know if this is something that we should look
Madam
at.
Chairman?
Put 'em out in the city.
Madam
Better
President,
to look at
I
this.
apologize for interrupting, but you scheduled this to conclude at 6
Oh,
o'clock.
and we're not.
Now, that has occurred, and you are still on the record. This is still an open public meeting. You are still in the workshop, and you are still being recorded. So at this point, you may want to consider either extending the meeting or adjourning your meeting or recessing your meeting. You have those three options.
Do I hear a motion to?
I move to motion adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Is there any discussion? We'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.
By the